Of the great many Hollywood publications out there, the Holy Trinity, Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, or THR, and Deadline are the three you would least expect to see to buck somebody like Marvel Studios openly in an article. But here we are, and we're going to talk about this. This is something you don't want to miss. Renegade Online. So, Deadline dropped this article this morning, and I do want to credit my good friend out there, probably watching right now, Kamran Pasha, for dropping this on his Patreon. This article slipped my attention this morning, had a lot going on today, and had it not been for Kamran's Patreon, I would have missed this. And of course, if you saw the last video that I did discussing Kevin Feige, Bob Chapek, the Eternals, the entire issue going on right now with Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Marvel Studios issues, Phase 4, Kevin Feige's future at Marvel/Disney, that discussion was with Kamran. So please go check out Kamran Pasha's Patreon over there on his page. So let's talk about this, because this is something. This is something. Okay, so first of all, Eternals seeing a possible $70+ million opening weekend. Let's take that one up front. Remember, at first, we discussed in the previous videos talking about the box office projections for the Eternals. Just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the projections going in for Eternals, according to Box Office Pro, which has a fairly reliable track record. I think they do a good work putting together the metrics to try and predict some of the opening weekend numbers well in advance, was projecting this movie to open between $100 and $125 million domestically here in the U.S. That number was since brought down. About a week or two ago, the numbers began to adjust as we saw reviews and more reports coming in about the movie. Of course, we have talked at length already about the Rotten Tomatoes score, which there will be a Rotten Tomatoes video specifically regarding this movie coming up. Working on that, but I wanted to get to this first. So we have this, and I apologize. This keeps jumping around on me. My browser is deciding to be funny today. So bear with me on that one. But as it stands right now, the final projections for this weekend are now coming into the weekend, I should say, they were about 75 million was the mid-range, between 65 and 85. And now, as we'll see in this article, they're talking about this movie could actually just wind up being in the upper 60s. So not even breaking the $70 million mark. So we have now seen the third Marvel Cinematic Universe movie come out this year, or the third one really since Endgame / and we had a Sony Spider-Man release after that. But as far as Marvel Studios is concerned, these are the first 3 movies since Endgame. This is the launch of Phase 4, although Black Widow not really in Phase 4, but we went from an $80 million 3-day opening weekend with Black Widow. Then we had a $75 million opening weekend, 3-day opening weekend with Shang-Chi. Now we're looking at possibly matching Shang-Chi this opening weekend, but from what Deadline is guessing, it's actually going to underperform. So let's talk about this, because this is Marvel trending in the wrong directions. Saturday morning update, Disney Marvel Eternals, as of this minute, is still looking to come in at $70 million plus for the weekend, but the feature could buckle and land in the high $60 million range if it doesn't have a solid Saturday night. For a glossy superstar ensemble with Angelina Jolie, Richard Madden, Kit Harington, Selma Hayek, and Gemma Chan, about superhero gods, it's not the type of opening we'd come to expect from the MCU, and this is where things go off the rail, because you can see the next part of this headline is, why is this a wake-up call? A wake-up call for the MCU. That's strong language from Deadline. This is a very Hollywood-centric publication. This is again, up there with Hollywood Reporter, Variety. They don't put out headlines like this without thinking them through first. When they're taking a shot at the king. I mean, Marvel Studios is the king of the block when it comes to Hollywood production studios, and they're just going right at it with this one. After the last week of declining critic scores that just don't seem to be going anywhere and getting any better, now hovering in the upper 40s and may continue to fall. So let's keep going through this. Disney has confidence that the picture will deliver between 70 and 75 million. Disney had more confidence than this a couple of weeks ago. The projections were much higher. The projections were as much as 50 million higher than this, according to Box Office Pro, just 3 or 4 weeks ago. Friday is right where we saw it yesterday with 30.7 million. True, among Disney-released Marvel titles, Ant-Man ranks the lowest. This is correct, with a 57.2 million opening. And it's possible that Eternals is 5 million shy of Shang-Chi, 75 3-day. However, the latter was boosted by a 4-day holiday weekend, which, again, we have discussed. Of course, you have Labor Day that weekend. That was another, I think that was another roughly, I think 9 million in haul or 10 million in haul. That maybe it might have been more than that Labor Day. I can't remember right now, but it was up there. I mean, it gave Shang-Chi a good 4-day weekend, but we try to compare tit for tat, 3 days to 3 days to 3 days in this case, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and now Eternals. Now, before some sector of the Wall Street media writes about the cinema's obituary or tries to blame the coof, let's provide a wake-up call here. And I really like this. He's taking this right at the throat in terms of what have I been saying on this channel for months now? Stop giving me the coof excuse. And if you didn't believe me before, when Venom hit that kind of opening weekend that outperformed its predecessor, A Quiet Place Part 2 outperformed its predecessor in the box office weekend for weekend. The people are there. People are willing to go back to the theaters. What have I been saying that people continue to argue with me about? No. The audience is still there. You just have to give them something they want. It's not a shocker to see numbers so low on Eternals, and it boils down to the film itself, not the current state of moviegoing. Welcome to the party, Deadline. Welcome to the party. And you can't blame Disney in any way, shape, or form for not selling the Eternals, as its marketing machine was in great shape, and this is true. Of course, with any kind of MCU film, Disney itself is usually spending on the distribution side, or Marvel is, which of course by extension is Disney. They're still spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million in global print and advertising or marketing for these films. Okay, in fact, like I said many times, the last one that they spent less than $100 million on was Guardians of the Galaxy 2 because it was an already known product. Everybody knew who the Guardians were. They didn't have to spend a lot of extra money to teach people who the Guardians were and tell them why they had to come see them. They were already very popular. People loved them. They knew it was going to be a hit. Okay, the marketing machine was in great shape. Oscar winner Chloe Zhao delivered a very Byzantine, confusing movie with 10 protagonists, and that's part of the deeper universe Marvel IP, which is always a box office gamble. But Marvel has typically bucked such risks in the past. That, in addition to being one of the longer origin stories, is the worst reviewed MCU movie of all time, currently sitting at 48% on Rotten Tomatoes and most panned by moviegoers in the Disney MCU with a B cinema score and a lackluster ComScore screen engine post-track exits of 77%, 3.5 stars. And yes, The Hulk, which was also a Kevin Feige film, was the worst with a B-. And here's another particularly damning line. Personally, after seeing Eternals, I couldn't even tell you what it's about. They lure you in thinking one of the characters is a villain, then they're not. At the end of the day, the payoff isn't as seamless as learning who was Kaiser Soze at the end of The Usual Suspects. Well, that's kind of like comparing this movie to Citizen Kane. The Usual Suspects was an absolutely brilliant piece of cinema. But hey, I get where you're going, Deadline. I feel you. And he's absolutely right. I haven't seen the movie, but from everybody I've talked to that has seen this, the complaints are almost universally the same thing, with rare exception. The complaints have been that this movie is just a total slog to get through. It is absolutely boring. And as I said in my last video, that is a cardinal sin that shall never be committed by a superhero action film. This is not a boring movie is never something that should happen with a Marvel film. You can say the story wasn't great. You can say there were plot holes. You can say that the actors weren't all that great. But a superhero film coming from Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige should never be almost universally panned as being boring. This is a travesty. And Deadline has figured this out. And they start asking some questions here. We learned on Deadline's Hero Nation that there were originally 12 main characters. 12. And then they part it down to 10. I might have suggested they should have kept cutting. Probably at least down another 5 beyond that. Perhaps Eternals would have been best served as a Disney Plus series. Ouch. Anyway, you cut it. I'm sure Eternals is a lesson learned by Marvel. To give you an idea of the impact of how running time impacts the box office, Analytics Corp Intelligence reports that Eternals on its Thursday night preview with a 6 p.m. start time, 2-hour, 37-minute runtime, only had, on average, 2 large format showtimes across the nation. And of course, what do we compare it to? Sony Pictures' super villain movie, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, which has a runtime of 1 full hour less, and started showtimes at 4. That means they had twice as many Thursday night previews as far as screenings went, more opportunities to see the film. In the same breath, while we're assessing the less than par results here, again, just tearing into Eternals in this article, we can't kick Disney in the teeth for sticking to a theatrical window with this movie. Exhibition has plenty to be thankful for. Disney didn't become seduced and pull another day-and-date theatrical release with Eternals on Disney Plus Premier Access, which would further dilute ticket sales, so on and so forth. Now, the rest of this goes into some additional metrics that I don't want to get into because the gist of this really is simple. Is that this is surprising to me. This is very surprising to me to see Deadline here. Deadline magazine this morning basically take Disney to the woodshed. Take Marvel and Kevin Feige to the woodshed. At least as much as taking them to the woodshed is going to be spelled out in this type of publication. I mean, you're never going to see Deadline or Variety or Hollywood Reporter just outright get nasty in a headline or get really critical in their articles. That would be very rare for them to go at a big studio like a Disney and do that. But this is their way of admonishment. This is about as admonishing as you're going to get from a publication like Deadline, and this is something strange to see. So, look, it could all be for naught. You know, by a month from now, 45 days from now, after this title has finished its theatrical run, which is only 45 days, it might have $300 million in domestic box office. It might have another $400 million globally, and it will have made money. I just don't see that happening at this point. I just do not see it. I think at this point, by tomorrow afternoon, we're going to realize that this thing is tracking below Shang-Chi, which is really bad because we knew Shang-Chi really had to get to that $450 million range, bare minimum, to really make a profit. It's still not there, and this movie cost $50 million more to produce than Shang-Chi. $200 million production budget, $100 million in marketing P&A costs easily, even with the extra $100 million that their partners put out. There was another article about that. And you see things like that with McDonald's and some car companies and things like this. But point being is that this is something to keep an eye on, and we will, of course, drop a comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Share this video out. And, of course, until next time, take care.